We saw over and over again, companies would deploy these proof of concept technologies that were amazing. If the user has any remote chance of getting data leakage in a query, then it's basically a dead on arrival application in an enterprise context. Network effects where more data coming in gives the AI agent more context, which makes it have better answers, which then cause more data to come in, is a bit of a flywheel that you want to start to kind of engineer.
Hey everyone, I'm Ethan. This is Future Proof, building AI products that last. In this episode, we talk to Aaron Levie, who is the CEO and co-founder of Box. We cover everything from the future of RAG to how to build RAG at enterprise scale, what you should consider when building an agent platform or an API that's optimized for agents. I think you'll find this super useful, so enjoy. All right. Hey, Aaron, thanks so much for taking some time to come on to Future Proof and help others learn about how to build AI products that last. Really excited for this conversation.
Totally. I think we are all just trying to figure that out. So I don't know what answers I'll have, but super important problem right now in the industry.
Definitely. Yeah, I was going to say, seems very important to Box right now. I was driving along the 101 here in SF recently, and I saw big Box billboard. It said content plus AI. Curious if you can expand a little more on that and tell us, what's your vision for that? Where are we going?
Did the billboard not fully cover the whole the whole strategy that we have? So yeah, with Box, we're a platform that helps enterprises store, manage, govern, protect, and work with their most important unstructured data. So contracts, marketing assets, financial documents, and we've been scaling the platform to over the past nearly couple decades, and we now have about 120,000 customers on Box. And enterprises use us from everything, from collaborating on, mission critical mergers with other companies, or launching of, blockbuster new, films, to new ad campaigns for a breakthrough new product. So that's the platform we've been building. But there's always been this kind of nagging problem for us, which is you create files, you share them, you work with them, and then they basically kind of get retired into some kind of governed state, once you've worked on them. And so, the standard kind of curve that is the life of a file is you create it, it's hot, you work on it, and then it goes away, and you never really see it again. And we've always sort of questioned, what if we could really turn all of that data that you're producing into this long running value for your organization? And you're basically creating intellectual property, and you're building more and more of it over time. What if you could tap into it over and over again, and it became this sort of source or wealth of information and knowledge and business value? And it was never really possible to do that, except for when we saw the ChatGPT kind of moment or breakthrough happen. And so all of a sudden it kind of flipped the problem on its head, which is traditionally the more data you have, the less value you get from it. In our space, in terms of unstructured data. And Gen AI basically flipped that, where actually the more data you have, the more business value now you can tap into in your organization, the more existing knowledge you can tap into, the more questions you can answer, the more workflows you can automate. And so AI really is this incredible capability that lets you transform your data into this incredible business intelligence. And so we're building the platform to really help companies go and do that. So we have an AI platform that handles all of the complicated, annoying plumbing that relates to connecting AI to content. So think about, how do I get the vector embeddings from my documents? How do I plug in different AI models into my content? How do I how do I do retrieval augmented generation on top of my data? So that's the set of platform capabilities we're building. And then we want to plug into the rest of the ecosystem, because we know companies are going to want to merge in data from a variety of sources and a variety of systems. And we want to ensure that we're just one provider of those agentic capabilities in our customers' overall architecture that they're building.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of kind of like the life cycle of a file and kind of its usefulness over time. At Paragon, we see a lot of our customers using, our integration platform to unlock the value of all of that content that's kind of like latently existing in all of these sources. I'm curious, with everyone rushing to do that, to unlock that value and provide more useful insights to the people that are consuming those sources of information, what have you seen actually what have you seen that actually delivers value? Something that's most effective, and what
Yeah.
role do you think Box plays in that RAG first future?
Yeah, there's a couple of scenarios. So the one big scenario is I want to take a collection of data, let's say my sales materials, and ensure that any new sales rep joining my company can ask a question based on all of the existing knowledge of every important sales related piece of information in my company to make them a better sales rep. What we can now do within Box is take any collection of your marketing presentations, your sort of policy documents of how to do, your sales methodology documents or your sales policy documents. You put all of that into what we call a hub, which is basically a collection of folders or files that you bring together virtually. And then we do RAG on top of that data. So you could have, a few thousand sales related documents. You create a hub for all of your sales reps. They go in there and they ask a question. Hey, I'm selling to this particular customer right now. I need to be able to have the exact right pitch to that client, and so query goes through, finds exactly the right chunks amongst the most relevant documents, sends that to the model, gets an answer back to the user in a couple seconds, and all of a sudden you've now tapped into thousands of documents worth of information where a user would never have been able to actually read through that data, or even a hundredth of that data to get the answer they were looking for. So what happens in real life? That person goes and talks to another person and says, hey, do you have an answer to this question? Which is obviously incredibly inefficient. It slows down the organization, and you're doing that constantly, throughout the day. Where now you can actually take this basically digital memory that your company has created in the form of all of this content, and you turn it into an assistant that brings that intelligence into any workflow. So you can do that with your sales materials, you can do it with your HR documents, you can do it with your marketing assets, you can do it with your contracts. So any collection of data where you want to be able to have a question and answer back and forth system on that data, we've made it very, very seamless to deliver that.
Got it. And I'm sure there was a lot of, testing with this internally when you were building out those kinds of assistants and hubs of content within Box. I'm curious, was it sales? Was it that sales hub that really resonated internally that made you realize, okay, this is one of the primary use cases where we want to provide value, because content is so wide, right? Curious if which things really resonated internally.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a problem because, by definition, we started a horizontal company, which means that we kind of fall in love with such a large number of use cases. So for us, there was not one single use case that kind of was individually the breakthrough. It was just seeing all of these different scenarios play out. The HR team wants a hub of HR documents to expose to employees. The sales team wants a sales hub for its team. The product and engineering group wants to take product roadmap documents and turn that into a RAG interface. So I think every department, every line of business, every industry vertical, all have a different use case that says, okay, I have a set of data, and there's a set of people that want to ask questions about that data where it was impossible before we had AI and we had these RAG systems.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, for some of our builders in the audience who are maybe grappling with a wide set of use cases that are obviously possible with AI, what advice would you have for them, kind of honing in on one, or maybe not, maybe making the possibilities very wide?
Yeah, I think the classic startup advice, or whether you're a startup or inside of a large company, is different from what I get excited by. So what I get excited by is vast use cases, horizontal platforms. But if you were to start from scratch, you really do have to nail, a few things that you do extremely well that nobody else does. So in general, and AI sort of has an affordance for these kind of very deep use cases that you can go extremely, extremely deep on. what I would generally try and think about is how do you knock it out of the park with one specific type of segment. That segment could be a horizontal, so it could be marketing in any vertical, or it could be a vertical play that is a little bit more, goes a bit deeper than what you'd be able to do, just for a line of business. Nail that one use case, but try and build platform architectures that give you some optionality and range of motion as the use case expands or as you enter into other categories. And I think the risk that some companies take on is you get so wedded to your first use case that your whole product positioning, your whole platform capability set is so wired into that particular use case that you are now backed into a corner. And as you grow more, as you want to expand out, you're kind of stuck in your particular area without a lot of range of motion. And so the thing I would generally advise is just crush it on some critical use case, and then over time expand from there. But make sure you've got a platform orientation that lets you continue to expand over time.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I feel like we're in a really exciting time to be building stuff like that, because you can build those kind of fundamental architectures and iterate on things like prompts instead, and have that be a much faster iteration cycle compared to traditional SaaS applications.
Well, I mean, it's incredible, right? Because if you can basically fundamentally swap in entirely different behaviors of your application or personas of your value proposition, in basically natural language, and just completely, iterate on your product in real time in a way that was never possible before. And that ability to, control the system prompt and the amount of IP that's going to go into the system prompt, I think is an extra, very, very exciting to see.
Definitely. One thing I kind of noticed from how Box positions, your AI offering, the Content Hub, et cetera, is just like this heavy emphasis on enterprise grade security. Secure RAG is a term I saw. Can you speak to this a little more and tell us, kind of what builders should consider when offering RAG, but at enterprise scale?
Well, so what we saw was right out of the gate, let's say a year and a half ago, when we finally had a little bit of the kind of core primitives understood of, okay, you have a vector database, we get the embeddings from the documents, we put that into a vector data store, you then query on that data. As we were building that, as the industry was generally converging on that as the paradigm, we by virtue of us just being in this space for a long time, we kind of anticipated that at some point, you're going to say, you're going to do the following. You're going to say, okay, I have all this data. I'm going to put it into S3 buckets or wherever. I'm going to get the embeddings from the documents. I'm going to put it in the vector data store, and then I'm going to expose that to an end user. But guess what? The end user is only supposed to access a certain percentage of that data in most organizations. So now all of a sudden, your sort of S3 storage is sort of completely divorced from the access controls that would then likely and sort of necessarily show up in that query interface that is that then how they're going to be able to sort of get answers to the questions that they need based on the permissions of and the access controls that they have. And so we saw over and over again companies would deploy these sort of proof of concept technologies that were amazing. It totally was incredible. Like, I put a lot of data into this system. Somebody goes and queries it. They get an answer, and it performed incredibly well. But then you think about, okay, how do I deploy that to 1,000 people, all of which have different permutations of access to that data? And then to make the problem even worse, what happens when that data changes? And it's changing every minute. So it's not just like a one-time sync into a cloud object store. It's somebody is modifying the permission access for one of the documents, or they're changing the underlying content of one of those documents. How do you keep those things all synchronized? So what we basically landed on is, okay, you're going to need some type of kind of secure RAG or permissioned RAG, which is not just to give everybody access to everything, but fundamentally adhere to the access controls that have been granted to the users, and make sure that you're not ever having any risk of leaking data to the wrong person when they do a query. So we are benefiting from again, kind of 18 plus years of very deep file system security control work that we've been building on top of. So we have a little bit of a head start by virtue of that, but it is something that I think all developers have to be cognizant of is your system will only be as good as the quality of the access controls on the data beneath it. And if the user has any remote chance of getting data leakage in a query, then it's basically a dead on arrival application in an enterprise context. And so the security, the data governance, the compliance, the access control, permissions, all of that matters in an incredibly deep way.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree. Something that we're always looking at for customers at Paragon. We have a lot of customers who are basically taking full replications of data from a system of record in order to do some local processing, analytical queries, or RAG-based applications. And yeah, obviously the worst case scenario is someone is just using your AI product, and then documents that don't belong to someone just get leaked via answers, right?
That's right.
So yeah. I'm sure. I wonder, as a content provider, or as a content host yourself, is there a preferred approach that you would ask, third-party developers? Like, how should third-party developers think about, respecting the permissions, for example, as they're resident in Box, right? What's kind of the right approach to take?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is sort of this is going to be this evolving question of how much do you sort of index information or re-index information that's already in the cloud and already in a SaaS system, versus how much do we have agents that kind of talk to different systems and then by definition are respecting those permissions? So I'd say in general that's an open and interesting question. There are some use cases where it's sort of not logical for somebody to re-index 100 million files from Box into another system because of just the complexity, the computational complexity, and just even the bandwidth and the compute costs associated with that for re-indexing that information. And so in that architecture paradigm, you'd probably want an agent within Box you'd probably call an agent in Box and you say, hey, user Ethan is asking for this particular question. Can you do a search based on Ethan's permissions and find the information that Ethan's looking for, and then that answer will then feed into a broader query, kind of across the set of queries. So that's the extreme end. In the meantime, there's a lot of kind of integrations where there is sort of indexing. Either we provide like a raw text stream from Box where documents in Box we automatically kind of extract the text from, and so we have a set of APIs where you can get that raw text. And some customers or developers want to do their own vector embeddings on that text and then put that into a vector data store. So we handle that. But you do have to then work really hard to make sure that those permissions stay in sync, because the moment that they don't, you're going to lose all your credibility, with the customer. And that's obviously, the core imperative building in the enterprise is the trust around security and governance and controls. And so that's why obviously you're going to need platforms between these different technologies that do, map the permissions, they do keep things in sync, and do ensure the data security and compliance in the process.
Right. Yeah. And that's one kind of thing that I thought was really interesting about Box's approach, that you actually allow developers to deploy agents into your platform. Curious, when do you think companies should consider being that platform, as in we're a host for agents, versus, writing APIs that are optimized for agents to access them?
Yeah. So I think that we're gonna. I mean, it's gonna be a pretty fascinating problem in general, because I think we're gonna be in a world where almost all platforms will expose APIs for agents as well as agents for agents. And even right now in real time, you're already seeing this, which is MCP, is this great sort of standard for how does the LLM talk to tools, and the tools are effectively usually just APIs. And then you have this thing called agent to agent protocol from Google as an example that basically said, well, probably the next frontier is actually you just have agents that are talking to each other, and it's not even as explicit as a particular tool as much as the agent has a set of capabilities that you can kind of go to the agent for and then feed answers back to another agent. And so I think we're going to have this sort of continuum of deterministic APIs that talk to each other. The kind of like back in the day, the Zapier and Workados of the world. Then you're going to have the MCP approach is like one side is AI, the other side is an API, and then you're going to have AI to AI as another approach, and we're going to need most platform companies will probably have to support all three, and then as an industry, I think we're going to decide how do we want to converge on the best practices about when you use each approach, right? Because each of them have trade-offs. Each of them have major benefits. Each of them have different costs and considerations. But I think you're going to see the mix of all three of those, over time.
Right. Yeah, and with all those, very exciting new standards, everything rapidly evolving underneath us, I'm curious, where do you think the moat or lasting value for AI companies really is? Like, do you think it's the user-generated content? Is it prompts? Is it, how we rag certain things? Or, just what do you think is, the moat for those types of companies?
My latest thinking is that there's basically, so, if you remember let's take the kind of company that has the biggest moat possible. So let's say a social network as an example, where you have a Metcalfe's law dynamic, which is more users on the platform create more value for the next incremental user. So Metcalfe's law was sort of this theory that more nodes on the network, you get effectively exponential value created for the power of the network. And it's very important, and it basically is the concept of a network effect. And we saw it in Facebook, we see it in YouTube and X and other platforms. And so that's always the holy grail of platform design is can you build a network effect, which is more nodes in the system contribute to a positive flywheel for the overall system. So then the question is, okay, what's the AI version of that? And I think there's a couple different approaches that we're starting to see. My more generalizable view would be things like network effects, where more data coming in gives the AI agent more context, which makes it have better answers, which then cause more data to come in, is a bit of a flywheel that you want to start to kind of engineer. So some mix of the amount of data you can get in that is sort of pseudo-proprietary, so corporate data or data sources that you paid a lot of money for. So you have proprietary data access. You have some degree of kind of like a domain insight that goes into the system prompt. The more depth in that, the better, right? Because there's some durability and differentiation of how deep is your instruction set for that agent. The sort of understanding and use of the tools and permission to access those tools. So there's a sort of a brand dynamic of what kinds of brands will have permission to access different kinds of tools within an enterprise. And then an understanding of the workflow inherently. And then if you can get that flywheel cranking, then your agents over time will understand the data set better. It'll understand the workflows better. That'll encourage users to get more data into whatever agent, that or agentic system that user is using, and that becomes then an increasing moat. And so, if we take like an example that we're not in the space of, let's take all these coding, technologies, right? So AI coding, whether you call it vibe coding or just the kind of AI IDEs, the playbook I would be trying to deploy right now is the company that can create, the better relationship between agents and the code base and the user's decisions about what those agents are doing. we'll sort of see this positive flywheel, which is if I know if I build a system that knows when the user accepts a certain agent's code in its workflow, then I can continue to improve my system prompts. I can improve my context window. I can also then obviously get even closer to the code base that's being built out, and I'm now in lockstep with that user in a way that user will have to start over completely from scratch in another system if they wanted to go and replicate that. That would take days or weeks or months to try and go and reproduce. And so you really want to be thinking about, again, well, how do you tie into this workflow where the more usage creates a bigger moat because you have a better understanding, you have a better degree of contextual awareness of that user's goal than any other system that when that user goes and starts from scratch in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think two reactions to that. One, it's very exciting that there's this flywheel effect of when you get AI generated content that's grounded in people's context, you get these a compounding set of documents that are even more helpful to the organization overall. So like more knowledge base wiki articles being created based on answers that were generated, or additional code that is generated based on user interactions. But I think my second reaction to that is like, that is also worrying in the sense of like, there's so much AI generated content to review then for humans.
Yes.
I'm curious, like, I wonder how that will go. Like, with all this, slop, so to speak. Sometimes it's slop, right? That has to be reviewed.
Yeah. So I think that there's a nice countertension to this, which is it's not that the more data your AI is generating, the better, right? It only is the more good data that it's generating is the better. And so you have this great kind of governing function, which is it has to be useful, and the user has to then find it to be useful. So if I vibe code something that is just useless because it's either buggy or it's kind of like a silly project, then I actually haven't created any kind of flywheel. That's not adding any additional value to that customer. So I think you automatically have this great countertension, which is it has to be useful what that user is producing in the system, and we will have to build tools that do not inundate our users with as you put it, slop, because that slop will just not be that compelling. And I think I'm a big fan of deep research because it's an incredible idea that like, okay, I could just have a long running query go for an hour, find exactly what I'm looking for, and come back with the answer. But right now, as an example, I think we have conflated deep research with really long output, and like that's the kind of slop risk is like we should be using deep research to work harder on the problem, not just produce more text related to the problem.
Right.
And so I think these models will have to do a better job at compressing more and more over time, as opposed to just producing more. And that's going to be another consideration for us all to kind of think about. Like the reward function almost needs a degree of efficiency kind of built into it for these systems.
Totally. Yeah, I love that point about how deep research doesn't just mean long text.
Right.
I actually have something in my ChatGPT like custom instructions, like please be as concise as possible. I just find that it helps compress those answers into something more usable generally.
Yeah, I mean it now appears to be. It appears to have had a reward function of please write 50-page reports, and like when maybe 2 pages would have sufficed, you still want all of the power of deep research, because you don't want just one quick answer. You want it to go explore and change its mind and find conflicting sources, but you want the final output to be something that is concise, compressed, easy to understand. That's sort of that will become more and more powerful, I think, in over time as these systems take on those types of capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just as a last question, just stepping back and looking at kind of the B2B SaaS landscape, I'm curious, like for the future, if you see every company kind of building their own AI or like kind of AI widget into their product, or do you think we'll see some consolidation into a few big AI products like ChatGPT, like Claude, that others just end up integrating into like super agent or a ton of little agents, in other words?
I'm gonna unfortunately cheat a little bit. I'm gonna say both, because this is sort of how the internet has always played out, right? We have all found a habit of we'll use Google search for some degree of meta discovery, but then we will often use the search, within a particular product once we've landed there. And there's always examples where Google search is better than the search of that one particular product, but I still do searches in, at least a dozen different software products, even though Google might also provide an answer to that same query, just because it's sort of out of habit. And so I think that you're really going to have this bimodal dynamic, which is we'll use the super agent for quite a bit, and we'll go to it and we'll say, hey, I need you to do something that sort of spans multiple systems. But then when I know what my task is in advance, or it's so bespoke and kind of custom to a particular technology, then I really want it to go deep in a particular tool, and I might either trust or maybe I'll just literally be getting better results from the agent within that tool. And there's sort of no way for the super agent to just go as deep as that very specific agent from that particular technology. And so I really think we're going to have a dynamic, which is you're going to have ChatGPT and you're going to have Anthropic, you're going to have Grok, you're going to have Gemini and Perplexity and so on, and you're going to go to these tools and they'll do these very broad kind of working across lots of systems. And then you say, oh, but I want to go and automate this workflow directly in Box around my documents. And the Box agent will just be, just a bit more focused, just a bit more tuned into our particular pattern of workflow. And then we're going to go way deeper, and you'll be totally fine with that. And so I think you're going to see both, emerge as common patterns.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And to your earlier point, ties into some of the agent to agent protocols that we're seeing emerge as well. Will be super important in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
Well, Aaron, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us on Future Proof.
Yeah, good to be here, and good luck everybody future proofing your AI architectures.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to get all the latest episodes. And to view our past episodes, visit us at useparagon.com/futureproof.